Okay, we are live on YouTube. This is April 3rd, 2020, and this is the City Council work session on budget KPIs. We are about to stream live on Facebook as well. And once we are live on Facebook, we will have Katie let us know, and then we can start the meeting.
1 second. All right, it's up.
Okay, so Madam President, would you like to take the lead?
Well, actually, I think I'm just prepared to receive the information that's being provided about any changes in the way the KPIs are being presented.
Certainly. So from the administrative side, Kate May is going to be providing a presentation. So Kate, maybe you would like to start or introduce some of the folks that will be talking as well.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And I'm here to present some slides about the proposed changes to our budget KPIs, key performance indicators. We've got some folks here who were part of this project. So the budget director, Chris Wagner and Sarah Boyce are available, as well as Gary Kirkmeyer if there are questions specific to the NBD section. There's a lot to cover there. So if there aren't any questions before we start, I'm going to share my screen.
No, go ahead, Kate.
Okay. So laying out a rationale for why a change is needed to the budget KPIs, some of our departments have dozens and dozens of key performance indicators. And we know from research in this area that if you have too many, it's too hard to focus and drive action, meaningful action on programs and policies. So our goal for a lot of this was to pare down to the things that were really most important, both from a strategic and operational standpoint, and ideally having no more than 10 per major work area. So some departments that have a lot of work areas like NBD will have more, and other departments that have more unified work areas will have fewer. We also want to make sure that every KPI relates back to a specific target, and that target should really link back to the strategy and define what good looks like for that program or policy. A big thing that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing was linking back a lot of the KPIs to the 2034 comprehensive plan so that people can see, whether it's elected officials or the public or people within the organization, how the individual metrics really fit back to a long-term strategy, the long-term vision that's been agreed upon by leadership and the public. There's a number of metrics that if you really go back and look at them, like we have in the budget office and in the Office of Innovation, we see a lot of data quality issues with some of the metrics that are currently compiled heavily manually. And if we can dedicate a lot of our time to focusing on what's most important when we're trying to build out our data infrastructure, we'll have better impact than if we're just trying to get the data quality up for hundreds and hundreds of metrics rather than focused number of metrics. And overall, there was a large demand from the departments that they wanted to modernize their KPIs. A lot of the key performance indicators had been selected sometimes decades before without much change. And as we all know, operations in the city do change over time. So we wanted to give some departments an opportunity to really look at what's most useful to their managers and what's most useful to the public to know about what their current priorities and needs are. And finally, when we were talking with our departments about how to change to have better metrics, we emphasize that rarely is a good KPI what we call a widget count. So just a count of outputs of the things that we produce. It's really important operationally to know how many things we produce, how many are right, and how often we make things. But it's really more important to know about the quality and the impact of the services we're providing on the public. So ideally, if we can link things back to a strategy and focus on achieving specific goals with an eye towards what quality, what good looks like, our performance management is going to be a lot better. So our goals for the future state when we were working through this pilot was, one, to tie as much as we could, tie every objective or every metric back to an objective from the comprehensive 2034 plan. Those that didn't had to tie back to sort of a catch-all internal goal of improving efficiency and accountability within the organization. And for each of these, we set a SMART goal. So if you're unfamiliar with SMART goals, as much as possible, we wanted to make sure that the targets we set were specific. So unquestionably, what we would know whether we hit them or not. Measurable, so we have to have data to be able to say whether we got there. Assignable to a specific group, responsive to change, and timely. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a perpetual thing. We wanted to say within this fiscal year or within this number of months. And then again, we wanted to reduce to no more than 10 per work team or bureau when possible. And for internal purposes, we wanted to make sure that for every single metric, it was very clear. What is the data source? How often is it updated? Who is the contact that we can work on for reporting? And that way, when we're building out our data infrastructure following with this pilot, we know we can have an action plan that's a lot clearer. So the framework we used when we approached the departments looked kind of like this. The blue section is intended to go into the budget book, and we built out a big matrix of the green information, again, documenting what are the data sources, how often can we rely on them to be up to date, and who is the specific contact that we can email or follow up in person to get that data. So we knew that this was a decent lift to do, so we wanted to make sure that we started with a small number of departments, one, to understand how this framework is going to work before we try to tackle the whole city, and two, to make an opportunity for these departments to help us see that there might be some need to change the framework and just allow for a little bit of variation between departments. We wanted to choose departments that were very different in their operations for this pilot. So we have a largely internal department like IT, and a very external department, a large department like NBD, and then the various units within the mayor's office. So the process that we used, we laid out the framework and the rationale. The departments in the pilot were all enthusiastic to participate, and we had them brainstorm about what was most operationally important to them, especially as it related back to the comprehensive plan objectives. They looked through the comprehensive plan and found those that best aligned with their top strategic and operational priorities for the upcoming year or two, and then did the hard work of setting true SMART targets for what they thought they could achieve in the next 1 to 2 years. We then followed up several times with each department to refine this list and how it would appear in the budget book. And overall, it followed the same submission cycle that the rest of the departments did in the normal budget process. So here is an example. We're going to start with NBD of how this new format works. So you can see here, we've got things segmented. This first one, this strategic initiative, relates to housing. So create high quality housing units, increase owner occupancy, and prevent foreclosures. Those are related strategic initiatives that all tie back to these two comprehensive plan goals or strategies. So you can see HSG 4A and HSG 1D tie back to those strategic initiatives. And we list references to a KPI table that's going to appear in the next slide, as well as the mayor's priority areas and the completion dates. So you can see there's 3 main thrusts of this, and there's metrics that roll up into them. So one, create new housing units. And we want to be really specific here. So we want to say, all right, we want to create new affordable units by the land bank and by the city. And we also want to create new market rate units. So you can see here, 263 is the overall target, and these numbers to the right roll up into that. There's another overall goal of increasing owner occupants, and there's 5 different strategies for how that's going to happen, and the different metrics that we'll measure to see how each of those strategies roll up into the overall goal of increasing city owner occupants. And finally, in this related area, preventing foreclosures. So we're going to track how many foreclosures were prevented as a part of city action. So I'll show you a couple more examples, and if you have questions specific to the NBD changes, we've got Gary here to talk about them. But another example of a different work area is the housing team wants to enhance the quality of existing housing. So we've got these 4 comprehensive plan strategies, and they relate back to these KPIs that we'll see in the next page. So ensuring that we have code compliant rental housing. So they're going to keep track of what percentage of rental units are code compliant. They set a goal for the average time to resolve code complaints, and we set a goal of rehabilitating existing housing units. So overall, rehabilitate 547 of them through these 2 strategies here. So there's others. We don't have time to cover all of them, but you can see that the other ones that will be in the budget book are centering around creating and retaining jobs, improving customer service provided by the department, and enhancing the quality of life for city residents. And a lot of these metrics we've seen before in the budget book, but not necessarily communicated in a way that really makes it clear how they relate. And that ties back to a very clear target that ideally we can track over time. The goal is that we will have the annual reporting in the budget book, but we'll be building out the data infrastructure to report on them more frequently for the things that have data sources that update more frequently than annually. And we're going to put that on the open data portal that launched a soft launch about 2 weeks ago, and we're building that out over time to highlight what's most important internally, but also most important to the public. So are there questions about the changes to the NBD section?
I have a general question, but I guess I'll wait till the end.
Okay. All right, so the next section to cover as an example is what the changes that were made for the information technology department. And they have two main goals that align, one that aligns with the comprehensive plan and one that just aligns with the overall goal of enhancing the city's transparency, efficiency, and accountability. So the first one, demonstrate security is in place for all data systems. And then the second one, focusing on customer service. So we can see these, I worked with them to look at about 30 or 40 different best practice standards for what IT departments in both the public and private sector are using to measure good performance in terms of customer service and uptime and reliability of systems. And they selected these 9 as the most important. And so this was a really opportune time for IT to implement new KPIs because they're implementing a new case management system called CASE. And with these KPIs in mind, they can build those these metrics into that system to automate the capturing of the data to make sure that 1, it's accurate, but also 2, it doesn't take them a lot of manual work to find the answers to report back. Innovation did the same thing, looking at what are our short-term priorities and how we're going to advance comprehensive plan goals. So we are mostly focused on helping the city promote online tools and open data. So one of our big recent thrusts that's going to continue across time. We're overall chairing up the data governance committee for the city. So we're looking to see how we can both govern the data, but also make sure that the quality and security are upheld. We are going to be assisting NBD with some creation of new data sets focused on economic development. We have ongoing programming around transportation, specifically looking at multimodal planning. And then overall, a lot of our work is focused again on transparency, efficiency, and accountability. So we have specific goals that we're going to be creating new city data sets that didn't exist before. We're going to teach the community how to use the open data portal that we've just created. One of the big data governance things that we're working on is the data inventory, and you can see the other ones. So these are all internally focused things with some external impact when it comes to open data. And then community wealth building really neatly fit into the comprehensive plan alignment. Their focus is heavily on helping entrepreneurship and launching new businesses, helping coordinate services for businesses, which all of those goals were clearly outlined in the comprehensive plan, as was financial advising, working with financial institutions to increase lending, and developing middle neighborhood strategies. So some departments really easily were able to find ways that their immediate work plans intersected with the comprehensive plan. And with these key performance indicators, they can set clear goals for what they think good looks like and what they think is reasonable to accomplish in the next year. So again, this is a pilot, so we only started with those. There's a few more areas that I didn't have time to really list everything that will be new for this budget year, but overall the goal is to use this framework to figure out how well it works, learn from the pain points from this year, and overall roll out next year to the rest of the departments to target what KPIs could be improved, how we can tie them back to the comprehensive plan, and most importantly, how can we build out the data infrastructure necessary to be able to accurately, consistently, and with minimal extra work, report out on these metrics, ideally more than just once per year in the budget book, ideally on the open data portal for everyone to be able to see and track the progress, at least quarterly for most metrics. And this all ties back to something that we've been working on for over a year now, which is trying to get certification through the What Works Cities program. We've been focusing primarily so far on data governance, making sure that we're using data and evidence in general management, propping up a good, solid open data portal that follows best practices, making sure that we incorporate data and evidence firmly into performance and analytics programs, and using these data tools for stakeholder engagement. In the future, you'll probably see us talking to you about doing more evaluations, using repurposing in the budget, and also pursuing results-driven contracting, but we won't talk about that now. So our overall belief is that key performance indicators can tell us if we're doing things right, if we're doing them the right way, are we planning well, and really measuring what the real benefits we're gaining from our work. Overall, trying to drive continuous improvement and using our data and technology strategies to make this work as easy as possible. So those were the slides that I had. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ready for questions or feedback.
Well, I will start. You actually answered my question in your last couple of slides. I was wondering how long before you start incorporating other departments, but you answered that. And the pilot, it seems like it's a year with the particular departments that you figured out. So I'll just end with just saying a compliment. I think that this is good. I've always struggled with the KPIs in the past. I always thought they were very abstract, and I think this really aligns them more. It makes more sense. So I commend you for the work that you're doing on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any changes to the clerk's office KPIs, or you haven't gotten that far yet?
That's not included in the pilot, but we look forward to working with you next year for the next budget cycle to look at those.
Okay, thanks.
What will we be doing with metrics around things in like DRIs? We're,
yeah,
you know, we had counted attendance and stuff like that, where you count widgets almost.
Sure. So they weren't in the pilot, but we will be working with them pretty much starting as soon as this budget is released. We're going to start with the next group. And the timing is also really great to work with DRIs to revamp theirs, because they're getting a new data system. I think they went with a system called Perfect Mind, and thinking about their KPIs as they're implementing that system will allow them ideally to automate some greater tracking of better tracking of their widgets, but then also the more that they track their operational metrics and the more of their operational metrics they track, the better we can build out models to see how they correlate to outcomes in the community. So part of what we're going to be doing working with DRIs is figuring out who actually owns the outcome information that can best be used to judge the impact of their performance. And in some cases that might make us have to launch some data sharing agreements. But the good thing about what we've been working on behind the scenes related to this is the Data Governance Committee has created new processes that are streamlined for data sharing that will make data sharing with external parties a lot easier. So our hope is that they won't be perfect right away, especially trying to measure more external outcome metrics, but that we're building a path and a clear strategy for both stating hypotheses and then being able to measure the results. So it's going to take us a little while to get to what good looks like for DRIs specifically, but we've got a plan to get there.
Well, okay, thanks, Kate. And also, though, with MBD, we received a good example, I think, is that we received an email, I think it was today, with a request that additional inspections for the code compliance inspectors, that they do more and increase their visibility and availability and basically performance. So how does something like that tie into the KPIs that are being proposed?
Sure. So I'll start out and then I'll let Gary jump in. Gary was very explicit when he was revamping his KPIs that customer service was going to play a big part. So I only showed you 3 of their 6 KPI areas in detail, but one of them is customer service, and he is building out a process to gather customer service feedback on the major service areas. So Gary, can you talk more about that plan and how that's going to be done?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kate. So, we have several customer satisfaction survey processes now, but we're going to broaden that to all of our application processes. Right now, we do it with C of Os. We do it with our permit processes. But we're going to broaden that throughout the department. So pretty much every application process we facilitate and our complaint process will include customer satisfaction surveys. That won't get to the email subject email. So let me just speak to that real quick. We cannot bring back 1997. Okay, I'm just going to start there. In 1997, NET had 27 inspectors in the field. We had 5 property conservation inspectors, 5 building construction inspectors, 2 zoning officers, 2 dedicated code enforcement officers, and today we have 33% less overall inspection staff. So we will not get back to that day. And I think we all need to, digest that and realize that. Short of adding 10 inspectors, we're not going to get back there. That doesn't mean that we're not effective code enforcement operation. We are the best in the country at property maintenance inspections. We're the best in the country at rental property inspections. We're the best in the country at lead paint poisoning prevention. What we cannot be, and what people like Mr. Mellon are used to, is we can't afford for an inspector to walk and talk with a neighborhood for 2 hours. We can't afford for an inspector that has 350 cases when they ought to have 225 to spend a lot of time getting bombarded with emails. So that, this is, we have to separate what we're prioritizing versus what everybody wants. And I understand why they want it. But just like every other operation in the city, we've all had to trim over the last 10 years. So our areas of pain that we've had to absorb is in that flexibility of time. And it really comes from the fact that we had, on average, we were averaging about 225 cases an inspector. Now we're averaging about 350. So that doesn't mean they don't get the job done. That doesn't mean 4,000 C of Os aren't issued a year. That doesn't mean 14,000 units aren't inspected a year. Nobody does better than that. So, but, they're not going to be satisfied if we can't drive down the street and cite every car that's parked on the lawn, or, we do the best we can. And I think we have to all understand our limitations. Did that address that, President Scott? You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have any additional questions. Are there other questions about this?
I had a quick question on the NBD KPIs for the affordable housing. I saw you said there were going to be, I think you said 260 or so, where we were tracking that. But a lot of time and effort is spent on trying to ensure a certain amount of units per AMI. Will there be any opportunity to see, as part of that total number, how many are at 50, how many are at 30, how many are at 80, so on and so forth, since we are always all on all sides painstakingly trying to ensure that we have adequate at all levels?
Right, that's a good question. So I think generally, we have these KPIs that are going to continue. Let me just start with, we're really excited about this transition. This is a meaningful step forward. We're going to have 5 categories that pretty much summarize our top priorities and really can reflect in a more holistic and inclusive manner for the uninformed to be able to understand how that relates to impacts on the city. Right now, when you go into our budget book, you have to go bureau by bureau. And if you don't know specifically, intimately about operational details, you don't know how they interrelate all these different bureau activities. Now we're separating all of that siloed approach to reporting into a more subject matter reporting. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from any of the bureaus, it's going to be a subject that all relevant subjects feed that data set. So aside from the plain number of 160 affordable units, yeah, we'll still keep internal statistics about how many in each of the various categories, just like we'll have other data we're going to continue to keep. For example, code enforcement, we have to report to the state every year on all of our code enforcement data. So even though you're not going to see notice orders issued anymore, or C of Os issued, or those kind of common data reporting, we're still obligated to report that to the state. So all of this behind the scenes data, whether it's Thad's data in business development or Kurt's data in code enforcement, we're going to continue to keep and monitor because we have to systematically for other operational requirements. So yeah, definitely we'll have the AMI broke down.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Just a question on timing. I think all this stuff is wonderful. I think more clarity on KPIs and concentrating them and focusing on SMART goals makes a lot of sense. Roughly when do we expect to be able to see the depth of all these new KPIs, and how much time will we have with them prior to the budget being released, or is it all at the same time?
So are you asking how long you have to review them?
I guess just the timeline for when we're going to be able to see the specifics.
Oh, you'll see it in the budget. So when we release the budget to council, we will have the KPIs in the pilot departments. So we wanted to make sure that you had this information up front because you'll see a difference in the budget book. And so we didn't want you to be surprised when you see that difference. And so because I know that staff will be tracking from year to year, some of the KPIs will be different. So we wanted to make sure that we explained to you what we were doing and not surprise you with it once you see the budget book.
Are we be able to get those slides, or is that confidential?
Yes, we will provide the slides after this.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? There being, oh, when will this go from pilot to full implementation?
So we're staging it in this year because we couldn't do everybody at the same time. And so depending on how things go this year with the tracking and being able to put the new systems in that Kate has been talking about, next year you'll probably see most of the departments go to, the new KPIs and we'll update you then. So it's a phased in sort of approach, and next year will be phase 2. And then if we can finish or get everybody up to speed next year, then we will. If not, then we will go into phase 3.
Going back to the pilot, I'll call them pilot KPIs for MBD. Homelessness. How do the KPIs that we have, how they're reflected, captured, addressed therein? Because we seem to be, we're in a different place,
right?
With regard to our role.
Right. So right now we're part of the homelessness consortium, but we don't track homelessness because we don't get that data. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there that the city can do something that it cannot. We do sit at the homeless consortium table. We have brought different issues, like we just tried to get the tenants union at the consortium table, and that was rejected. So we don't own that table. We're a partner at that table. And so right now, because the data isn't housed within the city, it's housed at the county level, we don't report on that. And I don't think that there's any way for us to be able to track it. And I do know, and James can talk a little bit about this from, or Henry is not on the table, but I know that this is something that our MAPI and the Continuum of Care committee at our MAPI is looking at. And this is the reason why they're trying to build this new system that would allow all of the different not-for-profits talk to each other. It's something that Congressman Morelli has been leading. And so they're building a new system that everybody would be able to buy into, and that data would be readily available. It is being built right now. Kate, you're shaking your head, so you might know a little bit more about this than I do, but that's being led by outside agencies, and we're just a partner in it. Kate, if you want to.
Sure. Yeah, it's the systems integration project that's across not only the county, but across multiple counties. And there's a lot of funding behind it, but there's also a lot of partners at the table. So it will take probably at least another year or so for that data, for the full infrastructure to be built out. But once that is possible, we will be able to combine data from health providers, human services agencies, And we can add some of our data to that as well from library and drives and anything else that really intersects with human services mission. And that will include homelessness services.
Okay, thanks. Okay, is there anything else?
I have a question. How are we going to integrate the customer service surveys that was brought up about a while ago? How are we actually going to disseminate that to people?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
For the customer service surveys, how are we actually getting those out to citizens for them to partake in it?
I can speak to that. So for our application processes, they typically will end with a document being issued, whether it's a C of O or whether that's a permit, or, you know, if it's a business, a permit, application grant or something like that. So all of that will conclude with an application. Like our home buyer goes with a letter from the mayor congratulating them on their purchase, and there'll be a satisfaction survey on the backside of it, right? If you get a C of O, thank you for playing your role in preserving the neighborhood and improving the quality of our housing. On the back of it, satisfaction survey. The only thing we'll have to construct out is the way we reach out back out to our people that call us that don't come through the application process. So that'll be more manually intensive. But everybody else that receives a document at the end of a process will have it as part of that.
So there's no plans for like a digital where they can just take it right online?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the goal of everything, is to try to get it online. I think, you know, depending on how we go down the path with land management and whether or not that provides that capability, I certainly think and believe and hope that it does. I don't think we're prepared right yet, absent from that project, to do it. But we're pretty successful at getting feedback. It's certainly not a one-for-one submission, but we get pretty good responses. Certainly the people that are passionately one way or another through the process.
And we do have a plan working with IT, not in this next budget year, but likely in the budget year after that. It's possible for us to allow citizens to register for accounts through Office 365. So you might be familiar with Active Directory, where as part of working for the city, you have one sign-in and you can sign in across multiple applications. We can actually set up a tenant for the public to do that. It's safe. You have it's a separate tenant for them to be able to register an account. And through that process, we can build out forms for them to submit feedback about processes digitally. So it's all about first making sure that we set up our Office 365 internally first, so that we understand how it works and just have that good to go, and then explore how we can use those same tools that we get for the price of the internal tools, applying them externally. So that is something exciting to look forward to.
Will we be able to do the same thing for someone to submit a complaint, a code violation through the internet, through that portal?
So that's a little bit more
Land
complicated.
management.
Yeah, so that's a little bit more complicated. Ideally, we'd like as much as possible for complaints to be submitted into the directly into the workflow systems we have set up. So for example, for land management, that whole data system is going to be able to eventually take in a number of complaints and public initiated information. So in some cases, we might use those Office 365 portals to take in case information, but whenever possible, we'd like to build out integrations with existing data systems so that we don't have staff going to 4 different things to solve the problem, if that makes sense.
So the land management system would already have that capability to take input online. Is that what you're saying?
Well, remains to be seen, I think.
Okay.
We're still in the early stages. We haven't done vendor scripted demos yet. We hope so. I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, it would be like this. You register online a complaint, you register some point of contact, maybe it's your email address. That goes through a workflow process. When that gets concluded, you get an email asking how you were satisfied in the process, or how you felt about the process, and solicit your opinion.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's nothing further, I guess we can adjourn this meeting.
Okay.